Today, we're going to be talking about the double-edged sword of Game of Thrones. See what I did there? No. Hey, I'm smart sometimes. So, everybody knows, or should know, of the show Game of Thrones. Seasons 1 through 6, peak television. Seasons 7, 8, shitter. So at the end of the day, I'm going to break down what were the great things about Game of Thrones and what were the pitfalls that ultimately ruined a perfect show up to the point of the last 2 seasons. First of all, I'm going to start with the character development. You have characters like Jon Snow, Daenerys Targaryen, Tyrion Lannister, Cersei Lannister, Jaime Lannister, who we'll get to in a second, that had different character developments all the way through. Jon Snow, ultimately, at the beginning, you think, oh, he's just a bastard, he's cast it off, when realistically he has a right to the throne in the end, being a Targaryen, and having that extra little thing in his bag when he is the badass in the show, and more of the center point as you get on, when at the beginning you really didn't think much of him from season 1 and a little bit of season 2 until he really gets pushed onto his own. And then Tyrion Lannister, who I think Peter Dinklage really stole the show in so many different scenes, particularly the scene where he's on trial with killing Joffrey, which again is just a great twist and a great thing about the lore of Tywin not liking him, and really just pushes Tyrion to be this hated person when really he didn't do anything. He's ultimately one of the best characters in the show, if not the best character. And then you have people like Daenerys Targaryen, who were the center point of the show for seasons 1 through 8. And she really is looked upon as the person in this show. And really, you can see her develop from a young girl, which she still is a young girl by the time she gets to the end and becomes queen, and then gets killed by Jon Snow, which again we will get to. But she really grows upon herself and shows that she has the compassion at first and also the leadership qualities. She is smart and really thinks about what she wants to be as a queen, and be better than her dad, Aerys the Mad King, which again is great at the beginning, but we'll talk about doesn't end up being that way. Then you have Jaime and Cersei Lannister, who again at the beginning, weird, they're incest, they have 3 kids, but you can see that Jaime really grows this whole show. And again, until he gets to the end, season 7 through 8, his character development is amazing. You grow from hating him and really thinking about his lore even before the show, where he's considered the Kingslayer. And really, you look at him like, do you trust him? Do you not? Then he has this whole thing with Brienne where you're like, he looks like a better guy. He loses his hand. He has to grow, and he's not that cocky young guy that he once was. And again, his character development gets shattered in the end. Season 7 through 8 shatters character development. Daenerys ultimately just turns basically in 1 episode. You don't have that slow build that the other seasons had. And again, you can blame it on time, but that's the problem, is there should have been more seasons. Then you have Jaime's character development, where season 7 and 8, he goes back on everything he was trying to get past. He ends up risking his life for Cersei. When weren't you over this? You went to the wall and you went to Winterfell to fight on your own when she ditched you and basically left you to die, but then you end up dying with her, which is, again, the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And then in the end, you kill off 2 dragons basically in 2 episodes when they were supposed to be the big bad thing. And you see how well it's used now in House of the Dragon, that dragons really could have been this end-all be-all, and you could have built up that a death was there. Euron Greyjoy could have built up that he killed the dragon, whatever. And then Daenerys is just that whole thing about her coming over to Westeros, and it was supposed to be this big thing, and ultimately it was just disappointing. You had someone with so much character development that could have continued, and realistically, you had her take over, and not really even take over, just burn down King's Landing. And then she goes to the throne, and even before she could sit on the throne, Jon Snow stabs her. And it's like, maybe that would have been good character development if it was built out. But then you just had Jon Snow sent to the wall, or with the wildlings to go to the north, and his character development was ruined as well. Then I really think the character development of this was just great season 1 through 6. And then season 6 through 7 just killed it all. Just don't even get me started again on Arya being the one to kill the Night King. When you have Jon Snow being the one that was supposed to be the whole time, that he was the big guy, that he was the guy that was battling the Night King. And then just Arya's the one with the Valyrian sword. And then the worst character development. And if you disagree with this, you're just plain wrong. Bran Stark could be the worst character I've ever laid my eyes on. I wanted to punch Bran Stark by the end of this show. And then at one point in season 8, he goes, I wasn't meant to rule. And then the next episode, he was like, why do you think I came all this way to rule? The stupidest shit I've ever seen. Game of Thrones did well, again, in season 1 through 6 by weaving plot lines. You had multiple things going on. You had Jon at the Wall. You had Daenerys and Essos. You had Jaime and Cersei in King's Landing with Tyrion, Tywin. Then you had Jaime with Brienne at one point being a prisoner. You had Robb Stark with Catelyn Stark. And then you had the Red Wedding. Everything happening multiple times at once. You had Arya going to the Faceless Man in Bravos. You had Arya with the Hound. I could go on and on about the multiple plot lines and how well they did it. Usually in shows where you have multiple plot lines, you look at it and you're like, there's too many things going on at once, but how they weaved it together and how different characters cross paths, and then sometimes they would cross paths and they wouldn't even know each other were there, is the craziest portion. And that was handled greatly. You could see that there was time between things. They had to make journeys across. In 7 through 8, you didn't have that. All of a sudden, one day you had someone at the wall, and then you had someone in King's Landing. Again, if you look at the map, it just doesn't make sense. And in season 1 through 6, they make perfect sense of how it takes time to get places. They even talked in the first episode with Robert getting to Winterfell that it took months for him to get there. Again, it's the extra time that they took to really build this out. And then I really think they had the build to those big moments such as Ned Stark getting decapitated. Unreal. Again, of course I would love a Robert's Rebellion show, but Ned Stark in those 9 episodes, great. You had the Red Wedding, peak. Everyone knows the first time where they were when they watched the Red Wedding. You had the Battle of the Bastards. You had when Tywin gets killed by Tyrion. I could go on and on. You had moments in these episodes that were just movie moments. And you had these weekly with 10 episodes a season until those last 2 seasons again, where you just knew something was going to happen in each episode that was so important. And you had the lore. The lore is one thing that's really drew me to the show, because really you have to look back and see what happened in the books, and really what happened with shows that aren't going to be shows. If Robert's Rebellion never gets a show, there's so much stuff in the book that really explains why things are important, why Robert did what he did, why Rhaegar did what he did, and really ends up building out so much stuff that you don't even have these characters in the show, but they're so important. Rhaegar in this story still, it's all about Rhaegar too. It's all about Robert still. It's basically a continued war at the end of the day. Then you get to those points where these characters mean so much to you that ultimately you get to the end and you're like, this was all for nothing. Season 7 through 8 ruins Game of Thrones. I think season 7 is still good. I just think, again, like I was saying, ultimately you have 2 guys that ended up leaving Game of Thrones to start a failed Star Wars project. And again, I think Game of Thrones, with being built out multiple seasons, probably to season 13, 14, could have still been peak television and still would have garnered the audience that they got throughout those 8 seasons. And really, at the end of the day, is it still a big show? Yes. But people look at it with a bitter taste in their mouth because of the last 2 seasons. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you think they could have added more, and let me know ultimately what you want to get out of the next few shows that are coming out, such as Sir Duncan and the Egg and House of the Dragon.